Oh, thank you, Dr. Mercola, and thank you for the interview. The basic tenets of the pH miracle is founded on two premises. The first premise is this, is that the human body, by its natural design, is alkaline. The second premise is this, is that all functions of the human organism, all functions of the body, are acidifying. So breathing, thinking, eating, just living your life produces waste products. I think the metaphor for that would be a car. You put fuel in the car, you turn the car engine on, it uses that fuel and it produces a waste product. So cars by nature, I would say, as an analogy, are alkaline by their design, but their mere function produces a waste product called carbon monoxide. We function the same way. All of our functions produce metabolic waste products, of which we have four basic channels of elimination. The four channels of elimination would be urination, perspiration, defecation, and respiration. Did I get all four of them? Okay, these four channels of elimination are the way in which the body removes its own waste products. If any of those channels of elimination are congested or restricted, this is when acid starts backing up, much like a drain. If a drain becomes plugged, things start backing up. And as acids from metabolism, acids from our diet, acids from respiration, and now a really, really big concern is acids from our environment. Ionizing radiation is a really big concern, which is also an acid. These four major contributing acids affect, our internal environment. So one other metaphor, and I talk about this in the pH Miracle book. And it's a very simple metaphor, and it starts out with a question. This is the question: if the fish is sick, what would you do? Would you treat the fish, or would you change the water? And as you think about that metaphor, think about another question. What would your doctor recommend? Would they focus on the health of the fish, or would they focus on the fluids or the environment in which that fish is swimming in? Well, the fish is a metaphor for the human cell. The human cell then would only be as healthy as the water in which it swims in. And over the years, the last 30 years, in evaluating the fluids of the body, not just saliva or urine or blood, but also the interstitial fluids, that when we look at the fluids of the body, the fluids are naturally alkaline at a very delicate pH of about 7.35 to 7.4 on a scale from 0 to 14, where 7 is a midpoint, slightly alkaline. So the body has systems within itself to maintain that alkaline design. And through our lifestyle and our dietary choices that we make, through what we eat, what we drink, even what we think, that can shift the biochemistry of the fluids of the body, which affects the cells. So the cell is like the fish. The fish is only as healthy as the water it swims in, and the cell is only as healthy as the fluids of which it's bathed in. So if we can maintain the delicate pH balance of the fluids of the body, then, therefore, theoretically, of course, the human cell would be maintained in its most ideal state. And so over the last 30 years, I've been looking at how our lifestyles, how our diets impact the fluids of the body, and then in turn impact the cells. And after looking at 500,000 samples of blood and 40,000 patients, and after 30 years, I've come to this conclusion that the human body, therefore, is alkaline by its design, and that is its perfect and natural state. And the body does everything it can to maintain that state by managing this onslaught, this continual onslaught, 24/7 onslaught of environmental, dietary, respiratory, and metabolic acids. And so that, I believe, is the key to health, and really got me going towards trying to understand the wonders of water. and why water was so critically important, and why, managing the internal fluids with the right kind of water, the right kind of structured water, the right kind of pure water, the right kind of electrically charged water, the right vibrational frequency water, and the right pH water.
Thank you for that wonderful explanation, and I just want to emphasize something from a medical perspective, having done training. Most physicians do their training in critical care medicine, and they're taking care of patients in the intensive care unit, and anyone in that setting is really obviously and acutely aware of the critical threshold that the human body needs to survive in. If that pH changes, in many cases by literally a mere 0.2, certainly far less than one whole pH unit, the person will be dead in either direction if you become too acidic or too alkaline. So it really is that sweet spot, which is we round off at 7.4, but is I think closer, as you mentioned in your book, 7.38. And that's what we're really trying to get to homeostasis at. So you've really dedicated a big portion of your research and adult life to this topic, and really provided a wonderful resource within your book of helping people understand that with some real simple metaphors and analogies that help people understand that concept. So thank you for what you're doing. And
thank you.
So I guess maybe we can go into the next step, which is you were starting to talk about the water, or whatever you feel is best for our listeners and viewers to understand and apply what you're
Well,
doing.
I think probably initially where people may get confused about health, energy, and vitality, and then also sickness and disease, because we're so prone as a society to think as disease as the cause rather than the effect or the symptomology of some underlying cause. And many times the cause has not been identified. And I've made some very bold statements, I'll admit to that. And I may be criticized by my oversimplification. And I do that intentionally in order for people to understand what I'm talking about, because if I get going down a road of too much science, then people don't understand some of the basic tenets that I'm trying to express. One of the things that I have said, very simply, is that there is only one sickness, one disease, and theoretically then one treatment. And the one sickness and one disease I've suggested is the overacidification of the blood and tissues due to the consequences of our lifestyle and dietary choice. If I want to get physically fit, I realize that I've got to exercise every day. I've got to work out. In the same way, I believe that sickness and disease is an expression of not only things that we're doing, but things that we're not doing. And I have also suggested that acid is the underlying cause of all sickness and disease. For example, you could not have an irritation, an inflammation, or a degeneration without some associated acid. And this particular point suggests that if the human body is indeed truly alkaline by design and is being disrupted by its own metabolic or dietary waste products, then this has to be potentially looked at, ideally researched and considered as a potential cause for most all sicknesses and diseases. And this is why I believe I've had such great success. The reason, and I call it a contextual environmental approach. As we look at the environment, for example, we talk about global warming. We talk about acid rain. We see the devastation of acids on our planet. You just have to look at the forests of Denali. It's a perfect example. The deterioration of the coral calcium in our oceans. These are examples of the ocean in a macro sense trying to maintain its alkalinity. And I think everyone that's listening to this would probably agree that if the pH of any water, particularly our ocean, starts declining, that all life would cease to exist in it. And so that delicate pH of the ocean, the delicate pH of our bodies, is paramount. And I believe the single most important thing that we can manage inexpensively, without getting into, let's say, expensive treatments, if we could just think about prevention rather than treatment as really the future of the cure for all diseases, that the beginning step to all of this would be, what are we drinking? And then what are we eating? And then what are we thinking? How are we living our lives? And when we have a symptomology, a cancer, God forbid, or a neurological condition, that these are just expressions of lifestyle and dietary choices that have led us down this particular path. We are literally sitting at the table of or the banquet of the consequences of our choices, and taking personal responsibility. Taking personal responsibility for our health, our vitality, our energy is what, and preventing these conditions I think is very important. And I know you're on the same page, and so I'm probably preaching to the choir here. But for those who don't understand where I'm coming from, I'm looking at the foundational causative factors that are leading to health, energy, and vitality, or the causative foundational factors that are leading to sickness and disease. And I believe alkalinity and maintaining the alkaline design of the body is the key to health, energy, and vitality and fitness. And sickness and disease is an expression of acidity. That's all I'm saying foundationally. So I wanted people to understand that. The last thing, or not the last thing, but the other thing I'd like to have folks that are listening or watching this interview is that we need to take the focus off the symptom, take the focus off the disease, take the focus off the tissues, and focus on the environment around the tissues. I believe disease is primarily environmental. I think you would agree with this too. I mean, we know 90% of all cancers are lung cancers caused by smoking. Well, that's a lifestyle that can be altered, that could actually reduce significantly the cancers that people are challenged with. We know that it affects the internal environment of the lungs and breaks lung tissue down. That's a contributing acidic factor that I think one has to evaluate. If I'm healthy and vital and I have lots of energy and I'm fit, what are the things that I'm doing to achieve that? I'd like to know about that. And so I've been looking at the blood of those who have many different health challenges and those who are healthy and have fitness. And there's a unique difference in the quality of the blood, which I believe is at the foundation of health. We're only as healthy as our blood, and our blood being the foundational material by which all other body cells are made from. So if we want a healthy heart, if we want a healthy brain, we want healthy muscles, if we want healthy bones, then the focus has to be directed towards, what is the qualitative and quantitative factors of the blood. And these can be measured by your medical doctor, and there are some qualitative tests that can be done where you could actually view the blood to actually see the structures of red blood cells. Are they round? Are they symmetrical? Are they even in color? Are they even in shape? Is the plasma clear? These can be visualized. How does the blood coagulate? Does it hypercoagulate? Does it hypocoagulate? These are factors of which can give us information prior to doing PET scans, MRIs, which in and of themselves could be toxic, prior to doing a needle biopsy, which can open Pandora's box and spill out metabolic or dietary acids or cells that are spoiling that can cause other tissues to break down. So there are some preliminary things that I believe that can be done once we understand what I believe is a contextual environmental approach to health, energy, and vitality, and a contextual environmental approach to sickness and disease.
Great. And you mentioned the tools that you're using, and I suspect one of them is the live cell therapy, or not cell therapy, but live cell analysis. And I've got some experience with that in our own office, but we could spend a whole hour or 2 hours discussing that, and I don't want to really focus on it. But I'd agree with most of what you said. One fine point, I think it's an important one, because many people make an error here, is you had mentioned to exercise every day, and I think we need movement. It certainly isn't true for most people, because most people don't exercise enough, but there's a fair number of people who exercise too much and don't appreciate the element of recovery. So recovery is almost as important as the actual stress. And if you over-exercise, then you're actually going to create the very environment you're trying to prevent.
Absolutely. I talk about overexercise as producing excess acidity, and of course the blood cannot withstand any increased acidity or any increased alkalinity. So any increased acidity or any increase in alkalinity via exercise or food or drink is going to be pushed out into the connective tissues or into the muscle tissue, and you actually feel that. If it's overexercise, you feel the effects of that overacidity, and the symptom is called pain. Where there is no acid, there is no pain, and where there is pain, there is, acid.
Yeah, it's a good clue, and it's really, many people don't fail to appreciate the importance of it, but pain can be very useful in helping protect us and serve us to lead us in the right direction, because how else are we going to listen to our body and allow it to provide us the feedback we need to fine-tune our approaches and our lifestyle choices? So it's a useful strategy, and it seems like through these years of commitment and of exploring this philosophy of optimizing the body's pH, you reach some conclusions, and one of the conclusions I really would like to focus on today is the importance of the water that you're drinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you could expand on that, because that's really central. I would agree. I really think there's not many things in life you have to get right, but for one of them, clearly, at least to get healthy. And for the average consumer in the United States or most traditional Western countries, the single most important thing they can do to get healthy, from my perspective, is to stop the number one source of calories, which is high fructose corn syrup in the form of soda. So if we get everyone to stop soda, both regular and diet, and switch to water, we'd be really having a major step in the right direction. But then you get into the devil's isn't in the details. So the fine tuning of what is the best water, which is what a great deal of what your work focuses on. So
absolutely.
Why don't you take it from there?
Well, just to add to your comments, and I agree with you 100%, diet soda or regular sodas contain an acid called carbonic acid, and the body's trying to get carbonic acid out of the body. We don't need to put it back in because it robs us of our alkaline buffers. Besides carbonic acid, there's a very challenging acid that's also in these sodas, and that's phosphoric acid. Phosphoric acid is damaging to the body. It activates the alkaline buffering system to create alkaline buffers to neutralize that, and it tries to get rid of it as fast as it can. The reason why diet or regular sodas can cause a lot of different symptomologies, and I think it's kind of interesting that the companies that are producing these drinks, when they add diet to it, the most toxic part of the soda is the acids that are contained within that soda, the carbonation. The body reacts to it violently. That's why most people, when they drink it initially, they have this little hiccup or they have the burp. It's the body trying to neutralize that particular acid. But if the body cannot neutralize that acid that's in those drinks, it gets pushed out to the connective tissues and out into the fatty tissues. And so diet drinks or diet sodas and any carbonated drinks, even carbonated water, which I'm against, because of the carbonic acid, causes the body to retain fat. Fat as the protecting agent to protect the organs that sustain life. So if the body doesn't eliminate these acids through urination or perspiration or respiration or defecation, then these acids go from the connective tissue to the fatty tissue. And if you continue with these acidic drinks, even some of these sports drinks, which are highly acidic, they have a pH here again, a scale from 0 to 14, they have a pH between 2.5 and 3.5. And these are highly acidic when you understand that the pH scale is exponential, and when we're talking about acidity, we're talking about the concentration of protons or hydrogen ions, that these hydrogen ions, which are very active, can cause tissue damage, cellular damage. And so the body has to immediately react to it. That's why we feel that energetic high when we drink, let's say, a sports drink, when we drink an energy drink, which are saturated with hydrogen ions or acids. The body has to respond to that. And it responds by creating alkaline buffers, the number one being sodium bicarbonate. The stomach goes into production of sodium bicarbonate and starts trying to neutralize that acid that you just filled your belly with. And it puts a lot of stress on the blood because The blood has to provide the basic alkalizing compounds to make the sodium bicarbonate, or the stomach has to pull from the blood to make the alkaline buffers to buffer the acids that you just put into your stomach. Well, you feel that as a source of energy. It's kind of like a quick high. But in reality, you've just set yourself into a stage of enervation. And in doing so, you're robbing the body of its alkaline buffers. And eventually, if you continue to do this, you're going to run out of alkalinity, and to a certain extent, it's going to start pulling magnesium from the muscles and calcium from the bones, and all of a sudden you start going into decalcification or demineralization, and all from drinking sports drinks, drinking some of the high sugar fruit drinks, some of the exotic fruit drinks that are on the market. And on top of that, the worst of the bunch of them are the carbonated drinks, from the colas up to the carbonated waters.
Yeah, so I think we're in total agreement on that. I'd just like to address one concept that is somewhat, I guess, throws a can of worms into the concept of optimizing pH. Because like everything in life, there's a balance, and, of course we tend to want to. The tendency is to be over acidic, but the problem is that a big portion of our health is related to our body's ability to digest food, and part of digestion, of course, is when we eat, we secrete hydrochloric acid. And there's a number of leading alternative natural medicine clinicians who are pretty strongly convinced, based on their research, that as one gets older, there's a progressive ability of the body's ability to actually release hydrochloric acid and hydrolyze the proteins and the fats and the carbohydrates down to their constituent levels. We can absorb them. So I'm wondering how you address that, because I mean, there a lot of these recommendations are actually to take acid supplements with food to help your body digest.
Well, in answer to that question, I wouldn't ask any of you to think outside the box. I would just maybe suggest that you make your box a little bit bigger and think maybe adding to the good things that you understand as it relates to the stomach's production of hydrochloric acid, and realize that there's another half to that particular equation. As a biochemist, when you're looking at the equations of biochemistry, for every molecule of hydrochloric acid that's produced, there's an equal amount of sodium bicarbonate that's produced. The question then comes down to, and I asked this question myself because what I saw as I increased alkalinity through the food and the liquids and through the lifestyle choices, I noticed that the stomach was producing less and less hydrochloric acid, but at the same time it's producing less and less sodium bicarbonate because it didn't need to produce more sodium bicarbonate to interact with the acids that were part of the breakdown of the particular foods or drinks that we were ingesting. So then what I did, I said, okay, if I'm thinking about this correctly, then the body's doing two things, and it can go in reverse too as well. If the tissues need alkalinity, I then concluded, from years of thinking about this and researching, that the stomach was not an organ of digestion, but in reality it was an organ of contribution, and its major contribution was in the production of an alkaline buffer called sodium bicarbonate. It was filling up specifically, theoretically, alkaline buffering glands such as your saliva glands, your pylorus glands, or the glands in the small intestine, even the pancreas, to secrete sodium bicarbonate. And then as I tested this particular theory, and I said, okay, if we put something in our mouth, let's say a piece of meat or even chewing gum, whatever it was, I tested a lot of different foods, depending on its acidic load, I said, would the pH actually go down, trying to break that down as it was mixing with the enzymes, so to speak, to try to break down the food as we were masticating that particular food, or was it trying to alkalize the food? So I thought then that if indeed the salivary glands were actually secreting acids to break down the food, then what would happen after the food left the mouth, that the pH of the saliva or the pH of the fluids of the mouth that were the residues of what had taken place would be in an acidic pH. And I found just the opposite, that after ingesting any liquid, after ingesting any food, except for those foods or drinks that have a pH of 7 or greater, that the pH of it went up. And what I found in those individuals that were sick, particularly diabetics. I kind of focused on diabetics, and the reason I focused on diabetics was because of my great concern of one of the fastest growing illnesses in the world today, particularly in children. And I kind of made a promise to myself. I says, I've got to figure this out. Something is wrong here. I've got people in Trinidad, and we've got 1 in 3 Trinidadians that are diabetic. What are they eating? They're eating chicken. They're eating lots of high sugar fruits, and they're eating a lot of root vegetables. They don't incorporate a lot of greens into their diet, and surely, they're not drinking alkaline water. And in fact, the water that I tested down there had a pH between 5.5 and 6, so it was mildly acidic. So I was very concerned about that. And there's been several tests. One Scandinavian test that's showing an increase in diabetes for children that are drinking acidic water versus the children that were drinking alkaline water. So there is a study it's a small study, but there was a study that was done on this. Of course, I kind of paid attention to that too as well. But I realized that when diabetics, particularly type 1, that they didn't have the ability to produce alkaline buffers, and so they would eat something, they would chew it up, and the pH wouldn't change, wouldn't go up. And in fact, in some cases, it actually went down in relationship to what they were drinking or what they were eating. And I thought, oh my heavens, maybe I've discovered something here. I mean, this is very interesting. I said, people that are healthy, when they eat something, the pH goes up, particularly in acid food. So if you eat a piece of meat or chicken or drink a cup of coffee, the pH actually goes up. And I theorized then, I said, well, this must be in response to neutralizing alkalinity, and neutralizing the acids of that particular food and increasing alkalinity in order to prepare the food for something very special. And then I thought, okay, well, what's happening in the stomach? Well, in the stomach lining, the stomach, yes, the cover cells are producing hydrochloric acid. I mean, that's part of the equation. But is it producing hydrochloric acid in response to the body's need for digesting or breaking down proteins? Or is it actually producing sodium bicarbonate in response to the phosphoric, uric, and nitric acid that are actually permeating out of the tissues as those particular tissues are being broken down? I mean, they were broken down in the initial digestion, I thought then, must be for mastication, and the chewing our food and liquefying our food was of utmost importance. So many years ago, then I said, okay, I've got to take people off solid food, not everyone, those people that are either diabetic or seriously ill, for the fact that, they need as much help to get this broken down, using up energy to break down food is an acidic process. And so I minimized acidity, supporting their alkaline bodies by using alkaline compounds, including the drinking of alkaline water. I found that we're able to instantly reverse any upset stomachs, any ad nauseum. And I don't know of anywhere in any medical text that actually describes the etiology of ad nauseum. But here again, no one's ever described it. And I thought, have I stumbled onto something here through my research that ad nauseum is the result of the body's need not for more acidity for the digestion of the food, but the body's need for more alkalinity to deal with the excess acidity that's come from the water, that's coming from the food, that's coming from the lifestyle. And so then I said, okay, if that's true, then let's put it to the test. And so I put it to the test. And the test is we take people that are sick, or we take people that have GERD, we take people that have acid reflux, and we take them off their acid-producing diets. We reduce what I call RAD, reduced acid diets, a RAD diet, okay? A reduced acid diet, and that's pretty cool for the young kids. They say, what kind of diet you're on? Well, I'm on the RAD diet. Okay, a reduced acid diet, and we start putting them on an alkaline diet, and in some cases, depending on the symptomologies, a hyperalkaline diet in order to take the stress off the blood. Because after I looked at the blood, anybody that's got an illness doesn't have healthy blood. I mean, that is self-evident. Whether you qualify that or quantify it, you can look at the CVCs and the chemistries, and you can validate the fact the people who are sick just don't have healthy blood tests, and they don't have blood that looks good. And so I started applying the principles of alkalizing water, taking the stress off the blood, giving the stomach a break, and providing, foods that didn't draw down necessarily on the body's need for more alkalinity, and things started to resolve themselves. All of a sudden, acid reflux went away, and in fact, it just didn't go away in a few days. It went away in a matter of hours. The symptoms were resolved. The bottom line, if you look at the chemistry, and let's take hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is a very strong acid. The pH on hydrochloric acid is going to range between 1.5 and 2. So it's a very strong acid. It's very toxic, and it can be very damaging if continually produced by the stomach. But the chemistry is quite important to understand, because the stomach has to pull salt, water, and carbon dioxide to make hydrochloric acid. So the formula of salt, water, and carbon dioxide gives you sodium bicarbonate plus hydrochloric acid. So NaCl, H2O, and CO2 equals NaHCO3 plus HCl. It's irrefutable as it relates to the biochemistry. You cannot produce hydrochloric acid in isolation. For every molecule of hydrochloric acid is produced, sodium bicarbonate is produced. The question I was asking myself is, where is the sodium bicarbonate going? Why, after all the food has left the stomach, we have a residue of hydrochloric acid? And the answer was, oh my heavens, this is the waste product of the body's need for more sodium bicarbonate. And I thought, could it be possible? Could it be possible? Could we just think maybe a little bit bigger here? That really what the stomach's doing is not digesting the food. It's really trying to alkalize the food and increase the pH of the food in preparation for that food in a liquid state to be in the small intestine, in the crypts of the small intestine, ideally at a pH of 8.4, which is moderately alkaline, which is the ideal state for that food or chyme to be transformed into embryonic state and into an embryonic cell. Now, this was a really unique thought, but then I found out just last year other scientists were having the same thought.
All right, well, let me just, I'd like to be somewhat of a dialogue, because I think it's important to do.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Really representing the readers. This is, for the most part, basic physiology for anyone who's taken college physiology courses or graduate level courses. The pH is very crucial, and there are enzymes which digest your food in the stomach, which are catalyzed at a very specific pH. It's an acid pH, and you throw an alkaline pH in there, it's going to stop working. So, and then of course there's alkaline pHs where other enzymes are crucial, and these enzymes just don't work. So you clearly need some type of acid pH. So you outline an intriguing hypothesis, but it's still very clear from unless you've discovered some alternate universe of physiology that all the basic researchers and scientists that I know of agree on, that we do require a relatively acid pH for these enzymes to work, to digest your food. But to counter that is that one of the most common drugs that are used in this country and worldwide, of course, are drugs to treat ulcers, which are either H2 blockers, which reduce the acid secretion, or proton pump inhibitors, which are even more potently dangerous. Now, these do clearly symptomatic relieve the pain and would really lend one towards support of your process, but we know they in no way, shape, or form treat the underlying cause of the disease and ultimately make people worse.
Right.
And what I wanted to interject here is that there are a number of clinicians, and I think popularized by Dr. Jonathan Wright, I'm sure you're familiar with,
I am,
who really advocated the use of hydrochloric acid supplements and documented, he's done Bernstein manometry tests, which actually has people swallow this capsule, and he actually measures the pH. So it's a very objectively documented process, and if they're low in pH, then he tends to provide them hydrochloric acid supplements, usually in the form of betaine, but some other supportive things like caffeine, bromelain, gentian root to help other aspects went on. But these patients seem to improve and get off their acid blocking agents and their digestion. So and of course, there's more than one way to achieve an optimal benefit. There's no doubt about it. So I'm wondering how you would resolve those two components, because you seem to have two divergent ways of approaching the same problem, and both approaches seem to be working. We know the traditional model doesn't work. It only relieves symptoms. It doesn't treat the cause. But Dr. Wright's approach and yours seem to be getting people better. So how do you reconcile that? That's the word I was searching for. How do you reconcile those approaches, getting people?
Well, I think initially Dr. Wright would get results, particularly if one is ingesting a more acidic diet. If your diet is based on animal proteins, you're going to need digestive enzymes to help break down those proteins and to liquefy that food. We cannot digest our own flesh. How can we digest the flesh of another animal? And if that animal protein is not broken down or digested and ends up in a liquefied form, it ends up into the small intestine, blocking the fluids to get into the crypts of the small intestine. When I'm looking at type 1 diabetics and I'm suggesting to them, we need to get off the animal proteins, we need to reduce the amount of acid loads, and I'm looking at the center of their bodies, and we're looking at this quantitative and qualitatively, we are seeing that there is congestion and potentially severe damage to the appendages or the intestinal villi of the small intestine, and when that area is cleared from undigested proteins, which many of these supplements will help, enzymes or things that will help break down some of these undigested proteins. I mean, I even recommend one, which is aloe vera. Aloe vera has a very low pH, but it also has healing properties. And I realize that there are people out there, whether they decide to eliminate animal proteins out of their diet or not, is perfectly their right. But I have found, if I'm going to, deal with a child that has a condition of diabetes, particularly type 1, that the focal area of that is not the blood glucose, but the focal area is the small bowel, because in every case I have found that the congestion and the damage to that particular part of the body is significant. So when we put them on a RAD diet, a reduced alkaline diet, and we eliminate some of the contributing factors that would cause congestion and damage, we can then eliminate some of these enzymes. They become unnecessary to break down the types of foods that need to be liquefied. We can then take stress off the blood. We can take stress off the stomach. Things start calming down. Most people would consider my diet as a very high potassium anti-inflammatory diet, because it's more focused on elements and minerals and foods that carry a higher electrical potential and a higher pH. And they don't take a lot to digest. I mean, if I'm recommending, someone to eat cucumbers and spinach and celery and all the green leafy vegetables and lots of good avocados, and I'm taking them off chicken and pork and fish, and I'm taking them off dairy and grains, this goes a long ways to reducing the acid loads that's putting stress on the blood. But what I've noticed, for those who are taking, to answer your question more directly, what I have noticed, and those folks that are taking additional enzymes, or when those enzymes are activated to break down these very difficult foods that need these enzymes in order to be liquefied, that their blood is unhealthy. And that's the key. That is the key. The key is you're only as healthy as your blood.
See, well, yeah, that's a premise, and I'm not denying that, but it's one that's clearly not widely accepted in conventional models, and it does lead into a whole other discussion of live cell analysis.
Well, even
but philosophically, I'd agree. You're only as healthy as your blood.
Put aside the blood, you can measure this with their own tests. When I say their own tests, you can take a CBC, you can take a chemistry, and in every sick people you can see the deficiencies in sodium and some of the alkalizing minerals. You can see the deficiencies in the red blood cell counts.
Your approach, though, for people who've had these challenges and who are implementing not necessarily an enzyme, because I'm not sure I'm a great advocate of taking additional enzymes, but
okay, well, we're on the same page there.
For at least supplementing with hydrochloric acid, for the people you've seen who've done this approach, and in your analysis, what I'm trying to understand is that when they've done that and symptomatically improved and would, by some measures, seem to be resolving it at a deep level, when you do your analysis, you find there's these foundational lack of optimizations based on blood determinations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. All right, well, that's good. So that's leads one to seriously consider this as an option. And let me just interject here. I've read your books. That's all I've done. I really don't have many more familiarity with it, but you're pretty comprehensive in the book. And there's very little danger from following what you're recommending. I mean, this is, as I said earlier, we're in agreement about 90 to 95% of the material. So, I mean, we have some fine points that we'll discuss, but there's not a danger here of trying this. You're probably going to get, in all likelihood, you're going to get healthier. So even if the theory is off for whatever reason, sometimes it can be. I mean, your theory can be off even though you're getting results, and there may be an alternate explanation for why you're seeing the improvements. So, but even if the theory is off, the recommendations are pretty solid. I mean, you're going to get healthy. Is at least my impression. I could be wrong too. I mean, that's the point to remember: is that that ultimately, every individual is responsible for his health. They have to listen to what their body's telling them. What I'm saying may be wrong, what you're saying may be wrong. They have to figure it out for themselves, and that's going to be the ultimate arbiter of truth for them.
Well, Dr. Mercola, I would say what you're saying is right, and what I'm saying is right. It depends on what the body is being confronted. And it's responding. The cells are going to, or the anatomical elements that make up the cells are going to respond to the environment in which it's expressed to. If you put water in a freezer, it's going to change its form. It's going to go to ice. If you take it out in the room temperature, it's going to change to a liquid. So, matter will adapt to its environment, realizing that matter cannot be created nor can it be destroyed. It can only change its form or function. And when we understand that, we could both be correct depending upon the environment that's being presented. And what I'm suggesting is if we want to improve the quality and quantity of life, then we have to focus, I believe, on a couple of very, very important key things. And the first one is the internal environment, the milieu, has to be in an alkaline state. And number two, that is going to affect the blood. And number three, what are we eating, what are we drinking, how are we living in order to sustain and support the most important organ of the human body, and that's the blood. And that's really the nature of my work. I'm trying to encourage people to look at what they're eating, look at what they're drinking, looking at how they're living their life, what is their emotional state, because emotions require energy, and energy produces waste products, and those acids, if not eliminated, can make you sick. You can make yourself sick with your thoughts. Most heart attacks are caused by thought attacks, and that's statistical.
And cancers too.
And cancers too.
I believe that's the case. We're in agreement on that. As I said earlier, most of what we're teaching are real similar. So I want to focus on some of the differences.
Okay.
Because people listening to this are going to, we don't want to necessarily preach to the choir. We want to give them new information, at least to the audience that I'm reaching. So clearly, and I mean, we can go on for hours otherwise. So what I'd like to focus on is this water where you really are widely recognized as an expert in this area. And I'm looking to help you teach me this, because I've been widely criticized within the community of people who are strong proponents of alkaline water, that I don't know what I'm talking about. I should interview someone who understands it. So that's part of the reason for this. But also, I want to understand it at a deep level. And if I'm in error on my assumptions, then I want to be corrected. I mean, I have no ulterior motive other than to get people healthy.
Yeah, and I believe that. I've always sensed that. Things I've read from you express that. And I think as it pertains to getting to the bottom of this and finding out what the truth, I believe that we're both sincerely interested in that particular outcome.
Yeah, and if I didn't believe that was true of you, I wouldn't be talking with you. So we're both in agreement on that. And I'm wondering if you can help me and our readers and listeners understand that your journey, because this is an important one, and I really want to emphasize and agree with you that you've got to get the water right. Yes, you get out of the soda and the pop, but that's kind of kindergarten stuff. I mean, that's basics. Everyone knows that. So what do you replace it with? And
right.
That's the bulk of what we're doing. And if you can get that right, then I think you're going to really catalyze your ability to optimize health. And there's a lot of controversy on this, so I think your contribution is so important to help us understand these and really get it at a deep level. And in some of the areas that you're going are somewhat controversial, but there are also areas that really isn't widely appreciated in conventional medicines, like structured water, which I want to touch on too.
Yeah, we definitely can talk about that. But to answer the question is why are you drinking alkaline water? Why would you even drink alkaline water? And in some cases, why would you drink acid water? There are times when you should be drinking acid water, and there are times where you should be drinking alkaline water rather than chemically treated water. Something that is natural. And oh my heavens, can we find natural water on this planet anymore? I mean, does it actually exist? Is there something that's pure and clean that's been naturally structured, that hasn't been polluted, by some infusion, from some factory or some chemical from some treatment plant? I mean, so the base.
Well, that's a rhetorical question, but what is the answer?
Well, the answer is this. First, we have to understand why are we drinking the kind of water we're drinking. And I must say this is the most important thing that anyone can do for their health is to understand that water is the most important thing that they can do. And the right kind of water that they're drinking can make a difference in how they feel. They can make a difference in the energy. And we're going to talk about structured functional water. But you also have to answer the why. The reason why I drink the water, the reason why I suggest it to my clients, the reason why I've written about it in many of my books is because what happens over time is the elimination organs, the 4 channels of elimination organs either get damaged or blocked, and the blood has to maintain its integrity at 7.365 to 7.4. And in doing that, any acid from food, any acid from environment, any acid from metabolism, any acid from our emotions has to be eliminated. If it's not eliminated, then it goes into the connective tissue, which I call the acid catchers. And that's why there's so many connective tissue disorders. And from there, it goes out into the fatty tissues. And when I wrote the book, The pH Miracle for Weight Loss, I tried to explain to folks, I said, look, you're not overweight, you're over acid. I said, love your fat. Be grateful for your fat and realize that your body's retaining fat to park the excess acid that you're not eliminating or you don't have the energy to eliminate. And that fat is there as a protection to protect the organs that sustain life. Now look, it's very simple. And you can do this without even exercising. If you want to lose the weight, just rid yourself of the excess acidity. Drop or reduce the acid contributing factors from your lifestyle and your diet, and you start losing weight at a very rapid rate. And it happens anywhere from 1 pound up to 3 pounds a day. So how can you lose that much weight? Well, when you stop the inflow of poisons, so to speak, into the lake, you go up to the source of where it's coming in, and it starts right in the mouth or into your head, with your thoughts. When you stop that influx of acidic poisons into the body can start repairing itself and healing it. So the reason I recommend drinking alkaline water, and first off, that water has to be clean and pure. I'm not recommending water that has chlorine in it. I don't recommend water that has fluoride in it. I don't recommend water that has radiation or any types of heavy metals or even pharmaceuticals, which are now being found in the water. That has to be cleared out. So there isn't an ionization machine sold by any company on this planet that will take most, if not all, of that out. You have to have a filtration system. You have to have a nanofiltration system. If you want to address, some of the particulates that are in the water. I mean, we have here at the ranch.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that point because it's a really important one, and because you just can't talk about water alkalizers. That's one element that just ionizes the water. You have to have a filter. Now, many of the units have them, but they're really 2 distinct technologies.
They are definitely 2 distinct technologies. They have to go side by side with each other, and we have to just look then at what's important in producing the perfect water You know, I call it, you know, pH. You can say pH stands for the power of hydrogen. I say for perfect health, we have to have the perfect water for perfect health. We have to focus on the pH, realizing that the body's alkaline by design, that if acids are not eliminated, they're going to get parked in our tissues, connective tissues, fatty tissues, in our brain and our breast, which is the major cause of breast cancer. You know, and we eliminate this risk when we address it with the water we're drinking. So we can't address that if we're starting with a water that's polluted. So we have to clean the water, we have to purify the water, and I recommend a nanofiltration system. It has nanofilters approximately 0.001 micron in size to be able to back out the fluoride, to be able to back out the ionization radiation. Filters, whether they're coral calcium filters, carbon filters, we've been using here at the ranch a 10 filtration system that brings our water, and we test it using a total dissolved solid machine. We test it for pH. We test it for its vibrational frequency. We test it for its molecular structure, and we test it for its pH. We test it for its oxidative reduction potential. We test it for everything. Okay, and we know we're clearing out 99.9% of these pollutants out of the water, but you can't do it with just one little simple filter. I mean, there's stages of filters that need to be considered.
Let's just focus a bit on the filtration, because it's an important part. I don't want to have most of it. I really want to go into the alkaline water part. But with this filtration, when you say nano size, with respect to filtration technologies, there's three broad categories: carbon, RO, and distillation. And so this nano, how does that fit into there? Because, I mean, many people would view RO as a nanofiltration because you have these micro membranes. I don't know what the size of them, but they're...
Well, RO, with the size of the filters, they may have a filter that's 5 microns or 1 micron. And we're talking about a nanofiltration that goes down to 0.0001 micron.
So you're talking about something that's levels below that of RO.
That's correct.
And I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, interrupt me. You're not interrupting me. You're just helping to clarify the particular point.
Because if I'm confused on this, I think a lot of my readers would be. And that is a novel concept to me. I actually didn't get that from reading your book. So that is really quite extraordinary. And I didn't even realize that there was filters that were below the RO system. So could you expand on that? Because that's an important point.
Well, if you're going to get fluoride out, you have to have a nanofilter that will literally hold that back. If fluoride is at 0.01 to 0.02, which is, you're going to have a filter that is 0.0001 in order to take that particular fluoride out. And I don't know of any filter that's on the market right now that's taking out fluoride that can even claim it's taking out fluoride.
Well, many people believe that RO systems filter out much of the fluoride, but what's your position on that? What's your review and research suggest?
Well, just the opposite. Just the opposite. The fluoride's still present. It can still be identified using nuclear magnetic resonant imaging. Or spectrometry. We can actually pick up some of these fluoride ions, and we've got to be able to pull that off. So we do that.
Does it remove some of it, though? My understanding is it removes like 70, 80, 90% depending on the filter. Not all of it, but most of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a percentage for you. We're looking at removing 100%, and that's our outcome. We're interested in removing 99.9% of the minerals, the heavy metals, and some of the chemical toxins.
That would definitely be the goal, but for many people, first of all, it's important to, I think we're both in agreement that conventional carbon doesn't remove any. There are versions of carbon that will, but they're kind of expensive. I think it's activated alumina that is designed to do that.
Yes. Well, yeah, so we are in agreement with this, and you have to go to the smaller filters. If you go down to
What's even better, though, is what we're really positioning. We hope to have victory with this for the next few years, is to eliminate fluoride being added to the municipal water supplies. And we've been progressively successful with that in Canada. I mean, the majority of Canadians do not have fluoridated water now, and we're actually campaigning with the Fluoride Action Network, Dr. Paul Condit, and hopefully New York City will fall very soon, and they won't have fluoride. So then the need for this really extensive fluoride, because that really is the biggest challenge, is removing fluoride. But if you get fluoride out, you're getting pretty much everything else out, perchlorate
Right.
and all the other toxins. So it's an important point, because I think the best approach is to not put it in there to begin with.
Oh, I agree with you, and I commend you on your efforts to make that happen. We're dealing with it now when we're trying to deal with our client patients and trying to remove as many contributing factors as possible to give them the purest and the cleanest water that is chemical, pharmaceutical, free, metal-free water that we can then start correcting the pH.
Well, can you help us understand how you're able to get a level of filtration that far exceeds that of RO membrane, which is, most people understand is really, the tiniest amount, because
Yeah.
it's certainly new information to me.
Well, here again, it depends on the size of the filters. If you're talking to someone who has an RO system, the question is what mesh is the filter? Is it 5? Is it a 1 micron mesh? Is it a 0.01 mesh? Is it a 0.001 mesh? It is a 0.00001 mesh. And
You can get different membranes within an RO. So an RO isn't a standard for one specific size. It really depends on whatever the manufacturer.
if the RO has a membrane that at 0.0001, it will then take out all of the fluoride.
And
That-
how many RO filters have that type of membrane?
I don't know of any.
Oh, okay. All right.
I stand to be corrected. Correct me. I just don't know of any.
Okay. But your nano systems go down that low.
That's correct.
How are you able to do that? It seems pretty extraordinary to achieve that level of filtration. And just because of the size, it would take so long. I mean, even with an RO system, it takes a while. But I mean, if you have the pores that small, you'd have to force the water through.
Well, yeah, the system does slow down the amount of water that comes through, and so we have to take it through our filtration system into a storage tank. So as it drips into a storage tank, this is how we then can provide water with a steady flow. We can't provide a steady flow of water through a filtration system. We have to take it through these micro nano mesh filtration system and then put that water that's been purified and decontaminated, and using a pump, a motor, we can then after we store that water, we can then move that water out of the storage tank that's pure and clean. And we do this down at Santa Vive. We've got 5,000-gallon containers where we hold this water so that all the water that the patients receive at Santa Vive in Encinitas, Mexico, receive pure, clean, decontaminated, absolutely 100% free of fluoride. I mean, that's really critical for us.
Your system you described involves a holding tank, which is basically what an RO system does too, except for the few. I'm beta testing one that is what's referred to as a tankless RO system. So the output does not go into a tank, but it goes to any receptacle you choose, and you can take a ceramic container or a glass container that you can have access to and clean and store in your refrigerator, and thereby eliminate that section of the equation. Because from my understanding, that tank is the weakest link in the chain, and because you're really creating standing water that really predisposes itself to becoming contaminated with either molds, fungi, or bacteria.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's totally free from exposure to the atmosphere, and so from that particular tank, it then goes into another filtration system. So RO removes all minerals, and that's not necessarily going to be a good thing. Where this nano system, we need some mineral content in order to begin the process of electrolysis to separate the minerals into two states, an alkaline state and an acid state.
Because if you have this purified water that doesn't really, it's essentially is mineral free, even more mineral free than RO, that you cannot perform ionization of because you have to have minerals in there to create that process.
Yeah, and that's why we have a port within the ionization machine itself where we actually would then take something like Hawaiian mineral crystals or Redmond mineral crystals or Himalayan mineral crystal rocks, and we put that into the ionizer machine, which it actually the water then actually passes through that compartment in order to pick up some of the minerals, much like a river running down a mountain would pick up minerals along the way too as well.
You know, and just as an aside, because I don't think we, at least you ever answered the question that I recall, you posed a rhetorical question: is there any healthy water on the planet? And from my relationship with Daniel Vitalis, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's a raw food advocate and really has coined a term called raw water, which he ascribes to or used to identify water from a natural spring. So that is really flowing to the surface, not pumped up, but flows up in mountains or such, and really believe that's some of the healthiest water on the planet because it's been purified through the ground system.
Yeah, we have two of those here on the ranch. Shelley and I and our family live on a 40-acre avocado ranch, and on this ranch we have two natural springs, which and also wells that actually spring to the top. And we measure this water, and its total dissolved solids are quite high, and so we have to correct that. If we use that particular water on our avocado trees, we end up destroying or killing the tree. So
what is the mineral in there that's doing that?
The mineral that's doing that is the high concentration of sodium. We're picking up anywhere from 600 up to 1,000 parts per million of sodium. And so we have to filtrate that out in order to bring that particular element down to something that's not going to be toxic to our avocado trees. And so we notice that when that mineral is in high concentration, this is a problem. So, you know, in adjusting not only...
Where's that sodium coming from? Are you close to the ocean? It's coming from the salt water, or...?
Possibly, but you know, some of our springs. Well, yes, we're down in San Diego, up in Valley Center, about 1,800 feet. So we're about 30 to 40 minutes from San Diego, but we're about 30 miles from the ocean.
Okay, so you're probably getting it from the ocean.
Yeah, but the high sodium content is a problem for growing healthy avocado trees and producing a organic, natural, grown, without chemical-free avocado, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
What is your experience with respect to these natural springs? Do you find them in general some of the healthiest water on the planet, other than the one that you produce through your system?
Well, it's interesting that, and I not only allude to our own water, but I also allude to Trinity water that used to be on the market. They had a well that went down 2.2 miles, and they were pulling out natural carbonated water, sodium potassium at 9.5 pH, not chemically treated, not electrically ionized, and was mineral rich, and it was one of the best natural, clear, wells on the planet, and yet that product's not available. We're pulling a water out of our springs, which is measuring a pH of approximately 8.2 to 8.5, which has an ORP, or an electrical reading charge, which is actually the electrical energy of that water, of somewhere around negative 100 to 125 millivolts. So it's still active electrically. It's got a good saturation of electrons, and it's got a good pH too as well. But its TDS are too high with sodium, so we have to adjust that down.
Okay, so now with the Trinity water, though, you mentioned that it was pumped up, and my understanding is that when you use a pump, that you actually tend to destructure the water. And is that something you look at in your analysis?
Well, we do look at structuring the water. We use nuclear magnetic resonant imaging, and we measure the hertz of the water, and we measure the hertz of the water, when we have a water that is structured or clustered together, because most waters will, or water molecules will cluster together, and of course tap water is going to be somewhere between 20 to 24, but when we measure the hertz, we know that they're clustered because the hertz, and a hertz is 1 hertz is 1 vibration or 1 cycle. Water's vibration will vibrate, when it's clustered, will vibrate at approximately 120 to 150 hertz. When we go through the process of electrolysis, which breaks the molecular clustering of water, and some of that water is clustering because of the acids of the water or the hydrogen of the water. When we break free hydrogen, when we actually break that molecular clustering apart, we increase the surface area, we thus increase the surface charge, and we end up creating another important aspect of water, which is a smaller cluster going down to even potentially theoretically to a monomolecular state. But to stay within a more conservative estimate, anywhere from 4 to 6 molecules of water per cluster. Now, what does that mean to someone who's drinking water? Well, if they're drinking what I recommend, which is 1 liter of water per 30 pounds of weight, and they're drinking tap water, if they're drinking bottled water, if they're drinking water that has this molecular clustering between the 20 to 24 molecules, that water is going to sit on their stomach. It's not going to permeate the tissues. It's not going to be transdermal. It's not going to move into the interstitial fluids per se. It's not going to break the cell membrane. And it's just going to sit on the stomach and feel heavy. And people are going to say, I just can't drink that much water. And when you get a water that's wetter, where we break down this molecular clustering down closer to the monomolecular state, this water is more permeable. You drink it, you feel something different. You feel the absorptive capabilities of this particular water.
And is this actually the structure of the water you're referring to?
This is the structure of the water.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you were assessing that through the NMR. And I'm familiar with that term, at least with respect to medicine, but that was what they called what we now refer to as the MRI imaging. It used to be referred to as NMR.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same technology or is it different?
I believe it's basically the same technology, but I really don't know.
All right, so you have an instrument in your office that you actually can do this NMR analysis, and it will show the structure with respect to how many water molecules are clustered together. Is that correct?
We have access to the equipment to measure this. That's correct.
That's good, because that's an interesting technology, and it's not widely available, and not many people even discuss it.
Well, I think I got into this early, where I started measuring the hertz and the megahertz of food because I was interested in its vibrational frequency, and I was measuring different foods from meat to spinach to water, and measuring the vibrational frequency and energy, because all matter vibrates. It all produces a tonality or harmonics, and it can be measured. And when something is in its natural healthy state, we find that the vibrational frequency is X, and then when it's not in a healthy state, it is at Y. And so when I'm looking at a bottled water, if I'm looking at a processed water, if I'm looking at a water that is not considered the molecular structuring of this water, we find these waters, their vibrational frequency will be anywhere from 125 up to 150 hertz. When we structure the water, when we break the bonds that are holding the molecules together, whether it's chemical or otherwise, here again, because acids act like molecular glue, things do stick together. Even our own blood will stick together because of acidic contributing factors. When we break those bonds apart, we end up increasing surface area. When we increase surface area, we create a greater surface charge. We can then measure the harmonics or the vibrational frequency of that water, and we're finding that healthy water in this particular state, what I would claim or consider healthy water, has a frequency going from 35 to 45 hertz. And this is what we're finding. So as the pH goes up, the hertz, the frequency goes down. And it's the same thing with pH.
Okay, go ahead. We can digest this because you mentioned earlier there's a number of benefits of alkalized water, and clearly one of them is the structuring. So I want to focus on that and help people understand the, I guess, the priority or the perspective of the structuring. If you, because there's different elements here, and how important do you believe the structure? And first of all, there's all alkalization or ionization processes structure the water, and after that, how important is that relative to the other benefits of alkaline water? To where would you put that in priority wise?
Well, I put that as priority wise. I would guess probably as important as the cleanliness of the water too, as well, because.
Well, we're assuming it's.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Referring to the ionization process.
You're talking about the molecular clustering, correct?
Right, molecular clustering, the structuring of the water.
And the structuring of the water is just as important as the cleanliness of the water, because you could drink a clean water and it could pass right through you. You're not getting any hydration.
Well, I'm trying to compare to the other benefits, like the actual pH, or are they all integrated together?
They're all integrated together.
In the ORP and the
Right, as we increase the pH, which is reducing the water of hydrogen. So we have a reduced water, we're increasing the pH. We have to consider that as the pH goes up, the ORP generally, not always, will generally go down. So we have to test the electrical potential of the water. And so through electrolysis, and we can do this chemically too as well, using nascent oxygen, because we also will measure the oxygen. Now we're talking about oxygen, we're talking about atmospheric oxygen, O2, which electrolysis helps to also break or split apart, forming nascent oxygen or atomic oxygen, O1, that binds to the hydrogen ions or the acids in the water, creating more hydroxyl ions or OH minus, raising the pH and lowering the oxidative reduction potential. So what we end up with then is a pH that's going to run from 9.5 to 10 to 10.5, depending on what setting we set it at. We have 3 settings on our particular ionizer. If we're setting it on just the first setting, we're going to get a pH between 7 to 7.5, okay, and we're going to get a ORP somewhere between negative 75 to 125 millivolts. If we go to the next setting, we're going to go to approximately 8.5 pH, and every time we jump 1 point, that's it's a logarithm, so it goes up by the power of 10. So that's going to give us an ORP that's running between 150 to negative 250. When we go to our third setting, which is the setting that I recommend, we end up with a pH of approximately 9.5, and we end up with a hertz of approximately hertz of 47, reduced from what we started out with, which was a vibrational frequency around 125, and then we'll end up with an ORP around negative 250 to negative 300 millivolts. If we're dealing with someone who's highly acidic, that their tissue is hyperperfused with acidity and hypoperfused with alkalinity. In other words, we need to perfuse the tissues with alkalinity. And then you can go with the higher pHs. It's not something I recommend that you drink on a daily basis, but ideally, if you're drinking what I perceive would be the perfect water, would be a water that has a pH of approximately 9.5, a hertz of 47, with a negative charge or an ORP of negative 250 millivolts, that is free of chlorine and fluoride and arsenic and lead and radiation, and pharmaceuticals if possible.
Now, there are a number of different alkalizers or ionizers. What's the more correct term to refer to them, ionizers or alkalizers? Ionizers.
Well, I think the correct term would be an ionizer, because ionizers can, and the machines that are being manufactured, whatever one is the one that interests you, because there's many manufacturers out there, but the ionizers and their electrolysis process, and each machine may differ depending on the technology that they have at the time. They can produce not only alkaline, but also acid water. Yeah, and so the acid water is just as important as the alkaline water.
We'll go into that a bit, but all of these different ionizers, is there's a number, as you mentioned, there's alluded to, there's a number of different manufacturers. Do they all essentially produce the same type of molecular structure at the same pH, or is the technology used to produce this water significantly different, that the benefits in which you just alluded to with respect to your vision or version of the ideal water characteristics, do those manufacturers differ in the technology they use? So they're all pretty...
Well, the ionizer is only going to be as effective as the filtration you put on front of it. Okay, so you're going to get different waters, because every water, and I've tested water in 72 different countries, you're going to get water pHs and ORPs and Hertz and oxygen, dissolved oxygen concentrations. You're going to get it all over the board.
Well, that makes sense, but assuming, I'd like to separate the technologies out, because filtration is one technology and ionization is another. But assuming that they're starting with the same purified water, this nanotechnology, or some similar crappy water, but they've got the same ionizations, will that ionization produce the same type of benefits that you just alluded to, or are there different technologies within the ionization specifically that do that?
Well, I think there's different technologies, but we're finding that there's not a lot of difference between, let's say, a plated system that's going from a 3-plate to a 5-plate to a 7-plate, and it's the plates that is doing the collection or the electrolysis, these titanium plates. Some technology enlarges the plates, keeping their machines smaller by creating a mesh, creating more surface area, and thus creating more electrical field that the water can then be exposed to. So, I can then look at, maybe something that's in a 3-plate ionizer, and it can produce a very good 9.5 negative 250 millivolt water that is, meaning that it's highly active energetically, that it is saturated with electrons, which I believe is at the foundation of energy, that our bodies run on electrons, not calories, which is another discussion, but that it actually becomes a food, that it's not going to pull energy. You can do that, for a lot less than if you bought, let's say, an ionizer that has 7 or 9 or 18 plates. I mean, for those...
You're still going to get the same benefits from a structure perspective, though.
From a structure perspective...
that you referred to.
Yeah, the electrolysis and the ability of the plates and how you... In other words, one of the technology was to slow the water down so you had flow control. So if the ionizer didn't control the flow and the water was just flowing out and over the plates based on how you turned the water on and at what pressure that water's coming out, if the water's flowing across those plates, it's hard to capture these electrons. It's hard to do the electrolysis. And so, having a flow aspect to that machine to be able to slow it. And of course, you could control it with just how you turn on and off the cold water. You could slow it down that way too as well, if it didn't have that feature on the particular machine. The other feature, which is different in a lot of machines, whether it has a port that will allow for the infusion of mineral salts, like the mineral salts, when I was talking about the rock salts, the Himalayan salts, or the... so that some machines don't have those ports.
To me, it seems to be an important feature to optimize the water.
It is, because you need some elements to be able to ionize with, to be able to pick up the electrons and the protons, to be able to... I mean, you can't ionize distilled water. You cannot... basically, electrically, distilled water is electrically neutral.
These ionizers they have to have metals in them, otherwise they're not going to be able to ionize. Now, you referred to titanium. Now, when I first was exposed to ionization technology, it was like in the mid-90s, and I know one of the units I was looking at had platinum as the electrode. And the concern there is that platinum ions are going to be leaching, and there potentially could be some toxicity from the platinum ions. And I'm wondering if you could at least address the different metals that are used to produce the ionization, if there's any concern in that, or platinum or anything else that might be an issue.
Well, titanium, they've used titanium, and they are using titanium in the body for implants and what have you. And it's been found to be an inert material. It doesn't necessarily interact. It doesn't activate the immune system.
Is this what's used in all the ionizers, titanium?
That's correct. Not all of them, no. in the ones
So you
that,
want to look for one that has titanium.
that's correct, and the ones that I would suggest you look for, you would want to find a ionizer that has titanium plates.
Okay, that's an important distinction. Thank you for bringing that up. And actually, I just wanted to reference, while I'm remembering, your belief in the electrons, which is really important. And as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm actually sitting on a grounding plate, which connects me to the Earth. It's kind of like barefoot running, and there's this, which is supposedly one of the largest source of free electrons around. And I'm wondering how you would compare grounding to ingesting the free electrons in the water, because I mean that to me is one of the benefits of drinking this type of water. Is this? I agree with you. I think the free electrons are massively important to health.
Yeah, it's massively important. So we're in agreement. I mean, there's other ways in which you can derive electrons. I mean, that's why I recommend eating raw foods and live foods and organic foods, because they're higher concentrations of electrical activity and electrons. And so when we cook the food, the benefit or the negative benefit that derives from overcooking our food or cooking our foods too long is we lose that electrical potential. And then the food does not have its ability to transfer its life force to your life force. So what is that life force? Well, that life force is in the form of its electrical potential, which can be measured. And that life force is lost when we process food and overcook food, or we chemically treat food. That has to be a very important consideration. If you're using, if you're deriving electrons from the sun or from the earth, or from just breathing it in by sitting in the flow of, let's say, the crashing of the ocean waves as it crashes down on the sand and breaks apart oxygen and throws up these negative ions, ions that the body absorbs, and we feel better. We can breathe them in. We can take them in through our skin. The skin has 3,500 pores per square inch, so we can absorb those. So we definitely absorb them through the skin. We can absorb them through our eyes. I believe the eyes is a mechanism by which will transform that electrical potential from the light, much like a tree will take and absorb light and use that as its life force.
It's a direct connection to the brain. The optic nerve is a direct extension out. It's really the only access to the external environment that we have is right through the eyes.
So through the eyes, we can then receive these light forces, this energy, and that life force can then be transformed into electrical energy, one form of energy to another form of energy to power the body. I don't know if you'd agree with this, but it seems to me that the body is electrical by nature, as far as its conductivity, the importance of sodium ions and the transport of electrons, and our tears are salty and they're alkaline. Our sweat should be alkaline. Our blood is alkaline. The interstitial fluids should be alkaline. The interfluids should be alkaline. I mean, we are by design alkaline, and wherever we can derive energy and life force and alkalinity, whether it's from the Earth's surface, whether it's from the food that we're eating, or the liquids that we're drinking. And yes, I'm a proponent of drinking 9.5 negative 250 millivolt, 47 hertz, a lower oxygenated water, and that's another subject we can talk about too as well, that increases the hydroxyl ion water. This is the kind of water that we should be drinking. And it doesn't have to cost you very much. I mean, if you decide that you want to invest in an apparatus to structure this water, and there are good companies out there. I could mention one that I particularly think has spent a lot of time, a lot of research, and has been listening to me very, very closely, and that's the Chance & Company. And I feel very, very keen on what they're doing, because they are listening to what I'm recommending, and they're then implementing that into the machines that they're producing. And so they're
just for our listeners, that's CHANCON.
Yeah, and so those machines are a reflection of my research. They are a reflection of what I perceive can be for this particular moment in time, which we're always looking to do better. at this particular moment in time, are probably the best ionizers on the market because they address these very things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily use this as a marketing pitch for Chanson or anything, but really to help people understand, and it may be the best market, but there's a lot of different companies out there.
There are a lot of different companies. That's correct.
I want to address that philosophically, generically, before we go into the details. But before we do that, I was really intrigued with reading your book that you mentioned the use of hydrogen peroxide, small amounts to add to the water to provide similar benefits of many of the ionizers. And I'm wondering if my understanding of your book is correct, and if it is, if you could help explain and expand on that.
Well, you probably, Dr. Mercola, you've probably read the book, The pH Miracle, that was published in 2002. And as you know...
Actually, I purchased a Kindle version, and it said 2010, but maybe...
Oh, did it say 2010? And I have tried to get people to move away from that. Yes, hydrogen peroxide in low dosages can provide additional nascent oxygen to the fluids or the body or to the water. But there are better things that you can use, and so I've moved away from suggesting hydrogen peroxide in a low amount. I'm talking about a 2% dilution or solution, and suggesting moving on a chemical basis to something like potassium hydroxide or to sodium chloride. And the reason for that is if you look at the molecular structure of hydrogen peroxide, the oxygen ions are connected together. And so it takes a lot more energy for that to break apart. If you're looking at the sodium chloride and the way it's structured molecularly, the oxygen ions are actually not attached. And so they dissociate freely into the water, releasing nascent oxygen, raising the pH and lowering the ORP and also the Hertz within instant contact with the water. So if you have a water that has a pH of 7 and you put, let's say in an 8-ounce glass, and if you put 2 or 3 drops of sodium chloride into water, it'll take the pH up to a 10 to 10.5, lower the ORP from a positive to a negative up to, let's say, negative 150 to 200. And you can do that without ionization, but that doesn't necessarily address the cleanliness of the water, and it surely doesn't address the other oxygen or O2 aspects of the water. And it doesn't necessarily address the structuring of the water, which the ionization machines do. So what I suggest is after you run the water through ionization, and you want, let's say, to increase its nascent oxygen or atomic oxygen, which is, the body is going to utilize to help mediate excess acidity, you could put a few drops in after the fact rather than before the fact. But, I have backed off, and this interview will be a document of that. I've backed off, suggesting hydrogen peroxide or H2O2 in lieu of something better. At that particular time, I didn't have anything better. But now we have something better. And so that's why I'm recommending or suggesting what I'm suggesting now with the ClO2 or the NaClO2 or sodium chloride and the potassium hydroxide for those who maybe can't afford an ionizer. Maybe it's not in their budget because the prices can range anywhere from $700 or $800 up to $4,000 depending on which one you're looking at.
I guess the concern here when we're looking at ionizers generically is that it historically has been associated with sort of kind of a snake oil multi-level marketing approach where there are ionizers that are being sold for over $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and a bulk of the profit is going to this distribution chain. And clearly that's not what you're advocating, it would seem. And I'm wondering if you can comment on that generally, because it is clearly, and there are some prominent leaders in this field that fall in that category. I wonder if you can comment on that issue and that concern, because you're clearly one of the leaders in the field.
Yeah. Well, here again, I mean, I recommend that people do their research, and hopefully they're listening to this discussion, because we want to find the best value for the least amount of dollars that's going to provide the products that we're actually, or the end product that we're actually seeking, and that is a chemically free, purified water that has the correct pH, that has the correct ORP, that has the correct dissolved oxygen, that has the correct vibrational frequency, and is structured properly. I mean, there's 6 aspects of water, and most of these aren't even talked about. I mean, so this is going to be new for a lot of people. So, and like I said, I can find a 3-plate ionizer that will produce the same results of a 7 or 9 plate for $1,000, $1,500 less. And so you just have to understand that those machines are out there, and you have to find a good, reputable company. I'm not suggesting that may not be from a network marketing company, but that's generally, historically, not been the best place to buy anything.
Right.
Okay? Historically, it hasn't been the best place. And Shelley and I have been associated with network marketing companies, but from a consulting basis, and also from trying to deliver products that have efficacy, that are effective. So there are water machines out there, 7 and 9 plates, that are half the price of those that are being marketed by network marketing companies.
Important question. These machines that you refer to, do they incorporate the nanofiltration technology that you referenced earlier, so that you can hook them up to your normal municipal water source, produce the purified water, then produce the ionized water with all the benefits you mentioned?
Well, I stand to be corrected, but I don't believe they do. I don't believe they've put that into their systems. I think they possibly could in the future, but I don't think they're addressing all of the aspects of water that need to be addressed that we've talked here today.
These are pure ionizers, and as you referenced earlier, the ionization is equally as important as the cleanliness of the water. So you really can't use these unless you're going to make sure that they're attached to a pure water source.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's an important distinction.
Well, that, and then you've got to be able to validate and verify that you're really getting a low microclustered water. And the only way you can do that is to test it. We have to test these machines. And we do test them. We have to find out, is this water actually producing a low microclustered water? Because even if it's ionizing, because I can do this chemically, you're not going to get a low microclustered water. You're not going to get a water in a monomolecular state. So that has to be considered as well.
And I'm wondering if you could comment too on some drops that are added to water. And I forget that, just unfortunately having a mental block now, but there's many people consider a brilliant researcher who developed these. It's like a little dropper bottle that adds to water. It's supposed to produce some clustering of the water. I forgot the name of it though.
Well, all the chemical treatments to water, or the non-electric ionizer machines that are, some of these apparatuses are called sticks. You put the stick in the water, let it sit for 15 minutes, and you have a pH water that maybe is 1 to 2 points higher. You have an ORP that maybe is dropped, maybe twice what it originally was. Maybe it was negative 50 and now it's negative 100 millivolts. But you have to sit there and wait for this stuff to happen. If they're using a chemical, there's many different chemicals. You can use sodium bicarbonate, just baking soda. A little baking soda in water is going to change the pH of the water. A little baking soda in water is also going to lower the ORP. But it won't structure the water. No, it won't structure the water, so it's not going to do that. And so you're not going to decrease the hertz on the water, and you're not going to necessarily improve the cleanliness of the water. So what you've got 50% of it right, but you've got the other 50% that potentially is deficient, that makes this water then unpalatable. It's a water that we probably should consider not drinking, and that's why I've said I don't know of any bottled waters now. In fact, most of the bottled waters are taking off the claims bottled at the source, because a lot of these are not bottled at the source.
I remember the name of couldn't remember before. It's called microhydrin, and I think Robert Flanagan was the person who put it together.
Well, as far as commenting on Micro Flanagan and his product, I mean, I wouldn't want to malign myself with anyone. All I would say is what I said before, is that these particular chemical treatments will not address the microclustering, nor will they address the oxygen. I mean, the dissolved oxygen, the O2, the atmospheric oxygen, which has to be split. And you have to have an electrolysis to do that. Electrically, you have to split it. And
all right, so let's get back to the filtration. So you mentioned one of the better high quality, high value companies out there is Chanson. Is there a company that provides a filtration device, this nanotechnology, or could you theoretically use this Chanson with a high quality RO system? Because I would assume that Chanson has this port, because it's integrated your recommendations, that you could apply these minerals like Himalayan salt or other high quality sources to provide the minerals you need to create the ionization. And I'm assuming that Chanson has titanium plates too.
well, and since we're not talking about any specific company per se that's, let's say, providing these types of filtration systems, if someone's making a claim of nanofiltration, then we're talking about something that is in the 0.01 to 0.05 range of filtrating out, some of the so-called viral aspects of the water, or the acid aspects of the water, to some of the very difficult things to remove, such as fluoride. And I don't know of any other company right now that's making claims that they can remove 100% the fluoride out of the water, and some of these nanoparticles that you have to have, other than those who are selling the distillation. If you have a good distillation system, then sure, okay, you're going to end up with a contaminant-free water, that's electrically neutral. But then again, is it structured, properly? And so
it clearly wouldn't be. But a good ionizer would be able to do that.
A good ionizer would do that. So if you're going to go into a distillation system, you're going to have to put the minerals back somehow, because you're not going to be able to restructure that water and create a low ORP, low Hertz water with low dissolved oxygen with low dissolved solids. Now, some of these machines too, which I have to mention, are taking out too many of. If you get too many of these minerals out, and you get down to under 50 parts per million, we're looking at somewhere between 100 to 150 parts per million. When we've gone through the nanofiltration, there's still particles there that we have something to ionize to deal with, so we can separate those waters into their two distinct channels, acid and alkaline water. But
all right. So can you use the Chanson with a high quality RO system?
You can, and we've done that. But I have to say that the Chanson also has a nanofiltration system.
Oh, they do? Okay.
They do.
I did not realize that. I thought it was a separate technology, so that's
Yeah.
good to know. Then I guess you had mentioned earlier that there are times when someone's going to need an acid water, and I'm wondering if you could review those indications as to and help provide some guidance as to when someone might choose that versus a higher pH of the 9.5.
Well, the nice thing about using an acid water, and they can be used for a lot of different things, but particularly in the commercial area, hospitals, clinics, they can use a good ionizer that can actually produce an acid water that is not destructive. I mean, you can put it on your skin, it doesn't burn the skin, doesn't burn the surfaces, but can biologically transform bacteria and viruses, yeasts or molds, using it to, let's say, do everything from sterilize, surgical tools to, cleaning floors in hospitals, to, using it as a disinfectant without chemicals. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a chemical-free world and we were just using water to do these things in hospitals? I think it would lower the amount of incidences of bacterial outbreaks and sepsis if we were using these types of waters. And I think
it's fairly effective as a disinfectant?
It is. We've shown in our research, and we've had that validated by third party, that it immediately transforms and biologically disintegrates E. coli, MRSA, strep, staph. I mean, we've got several readings on this as far as how effective it is. So it's a great disinfectant. I mean, if
viruses?
Viruses too as well. So if we're dealing with this low pH of around 2 at a positive, now we're going to reverse the thing. We were at,
Is it a pH of 2?
It's a pH of 2, 2.5.
But it's pretty close to stomach acid. So I mean, isn't there a danger of,
well,
yourself?
Well, you don't. That's the beauty of this. It doesn't affect the healthy tissue, and we see this over and over again. That's the beauty of this, and so we've used it on conditions of diabetic neuropathy to improve circulation to the extremities, because we're dealing with the principle of polarity and the physics of opposites attract. And when we use the acid water, which has a polarity of positive, and we want to get blood to the extremities, i.e. the toes, the feet, the ankles, the calves, the knees, depending on how severe the neuropathy is, the polarity of the water will pull the blood to it, because blood follows its electrical attraction, or its opposite, polarity. So blood being electrically negatively charged on its surface, carrying a negative charge, the acid water becomes a wonderful treatment, if you might say. I hate to use that word, I'm using it loosely here, but it's something that can use to literally pull blood to the extremities, where you've got it,
But for the most part, this acid water is not, you're not using it orally, it's only topically.
The only time you would use it orally, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend a 1.5 to 2, I would suggest maybe a 3, in lieu of, let's say, someone who is considering taking an acid antibiotic, which, all antibiotics are made from fermentation, they're all acids, using something like an acid water in lieu of a chemical approach. They could use a water approach to help mediate the biological breakdown and disintegration of bacteria versus using a chemical approach.
Well, we have many people believe that we have 100 trillion bacteria in our body. Most of course, reside in the intestinal tract. Does this acid water discriminate between healthy bacteria and beneficial probiotics versus pathogenic bacteria?
It would work the same way theoretically as an antibiotic, but without destroying or damaging the healthy tissue, which the antibiotic does.
Well, that's understandable for human tissue, but it's not going to destroy human somatic cells. But there's loads of good beneficial bacteria that if you sterilize, and that's actually one of the dangers, of course, of taking antibiotics, because they kill those.
And that would be one of the dangers, unless you're dealing with a condition like this, where you're making a decision between a chemical treatment or a natural or organic treatment. This would be a choice. And another choice would be if someone is severely constipated, where we need to break down undigested matters in the 9 yards of the small intestine. Rather than using a chemical approach to break that down, you could drink small amounts of the acid water to help break down, for a very short period of time, to break down the undigested matter that's causing the constipation.
And what type of volumes and what type of time frame are you talking about?
Well, we're talking about small amounts, which would be anywhere from 1 to 2 ounces, anywhere from 3 to 6 times a day. And you would only do this on a short time, anywhere from 24 hours to 72 hours, until the relief was up. So you want to use an herbal approach to constipation, or you could use a water approach to constipation. But primarily, the acid water is used as a disinfectant outside the body. It's used on the skin for, let's say, acids that are being expressed through the pores of the skin, because that's where they come. All blemishes of the skin are the result of the body pushing acid out through the pores of the skin rather than through the urinary tract system or through the bowels. If it's coming out through the skin, you can actually clear or clean the skin or disinfect the skin with this water, and then you can follow it up with an alkaline water to help reestablish the pH of the skin.
Now, typically these ionizers produce a stream of water, many ways not different than an RO system, where you've got one stream is the filtered water and the other stream is the non-filtered. So in the ionizers, you'd have the alkaline water on one stream and the acid water on the other, because it separates them out. And you just mentioned a few of the indications for the acid water, but what do most people do? Do they just let it run down the drain, or they clean their floors with it, or water their plants, or what?
Well, 70 to 80% of the water that's coming out of the spigot, the flexible spigot, is the alkaline water, and anywhere from 20 to 30% is the acid water. And it's small amount. I've always recommended that you store that water, and that the soil, you can use it with your plants. You put it around in the soil to help break down some of the minerals, to help mineralize the plants. So they do very well with some of the acid water. But mainly for cleaning floors, mainly for as a disinfectant, for countertops, for cleaning windows. You can also use it, as I've mentioned, to help increase circulation to the extremities.
Okay, this is terrific. You're just so fond of information. You really clearly are one of the leading experts in this area, and I'm just so glad that we're willing to share your information with us, because you're really a massive source of knowledge on this topic. And I think we can go on for...
Well, yeah, we could. I have to say about the alkaline water, because I'm really excited about washing machines and that are actually washing our clothes that are chemical free, and using the high alkaline water to clean our clothes rather than using phosphorus-based chemicals.
That's an interesting option, and maybe if you can expand on that, because in my understanding is that this is somewhat like an RO system, and that it takes a while to produce this volume of water, and how do you get the 10, 20, 30, 40, I don't know how many gallons of water in a washing machine, but it's a lot of water. Do you store that in a tank and then use it, or is there a system that provides alkaline water to wash your clothes with?
Well, there are a couple of companies. One is in Korea, and more are going to pop up. You're going to see more of these on the markets. And I was really surprised when I went to a furniture store that actually sold appliances. They're actually selling these non-chemical detergent washing machines, and they're ionizers, and they actually implant an ionizer right within the washing machine. And of course, you hook it up to your cold water, and it runs through this system. Here again, you're not going to produce the best water for drinking, but if you can get a 9.5 to 10 water, because of its pH and its ORP, you have to, I guess from our discussion, I would perceive those who are listening now realize that this water is going to be electrically attractive to its opposite. So if we've got a high pH water that has a negative charge, it's going to attract to the dirt and the grime and the grease, which is positively charged, and that's how it pulls it out, chemically free. So all you do is end up washing, chemically free, cleaning your clothes, and guess what happens to the fabrics? The fabrics stay bright. Yeah, well, they stay bright, and the fibers don't break down from the chemicals that are being used. And I see my wife doing this sometimes. She'll purchase a beautiful silk scarf or a blouse, and she'll be in there washing it by hand. And I said, well, what are you putting in there? And she'll have some sort of chemical in there. I said, well, why don't you just take the alkaline water and wash it in the alkaline water, because it does the same thing. So that's another source of use, or another usage for your alkaline water for actually taking out dirt and grime from your clothes. I like to drink chlorophyll, so sometimes this chlorophyll ends up on a tie, or it ends up on the carpet, and I go, oh no, because anybody that has ever had a drink of chlorophyll, they just have to look at their tongue and their teeth and go, oh boy, this stuff stains, and you spill it and you go, oh, what's going to take it out, and And when carpets are stained or clothes are stained, you take a little bit of that acid water and it takes it right out. It's gone.
You clean it with the acid water?
Well, on this one you would, because you want to break down the chlorophyll. And so you break that down, and then you could follow up with the alkalinity too as well, because you want to neutralize that acid. But for the carpet, I just use a little of the low pH acid water to take out chlorophyll stains.
That works really well is simple peroxide, the 3%, not a higher concentration.
Well, peroxide has a pH of 2.5 to 3, so you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it chemically, versus, let's say, using the water, the low pH water, which here on the machines that we use here at the ranch, we're creating a pH as low as 1.5 to 2.5, depending on how slow we run that water through. And so we can manipulate the kind of water we want, because we've been playing around with this for many, many years.
Okay, and it occurred to me too that in the washing machine, you really, since you're not drinking it, you really don't need a high quality purified water to go through it. And you can probably, and that's actually beneficial, because when you're taking those out, that's actually what contributes to the.
Yeah, well, you could use I mean, you could use the water that's coming in from the main source. If you have a house filtration system that takes out chlorine, I mean, that would be helpful. At least take out the chlorine. And some of the other chemicals that may be resident there. But these are some of the things for the future. So I perceive clinics and hospitals and offices, using becoming chemical free, green hospitals, green clinics, green places where stores. I mean, even in the grocery store, we find that. If they change the water that they're spraying on the fruits and vegetables, when you go to the store, you go, I wonder what kind of water, they're spraying on these fruits and vegetables. Oh, they're organic, but, what is going on to the fruits and vegetables, or that they're trying to keep fresh and alive? And we find that when we take the water and alter that through a filtration and ionization, and the water that's coming out that goes on to these organic vegetables, they can actually reside within that particular state 2 to 3 times longer than just the tap water. So we end up preserving the life of anything, whether it be the human body, the animal body. Animals love this too as well. We give our animals alkaline water too. And if you take a cat and you put acid water on one side, or tap water on one side, or bottled water on one side, and then you put the 9.5 pH water, watch what water the cat goes to.
That's a very good biological test. I'm curious in the commercial application that you referred to, because I've been shopping for vegetables personally in a organic market that is locally grown foods, and I noticed that they do wash it down with a commercial municipal water supply. So how would they just take large bottles, 5-gallon sprayers, and just spray it with the alkaline water?
Well, yeah, sometimes you see the grocers spraying it, and other times they've already got a system built in to where they would have to put a filtration system in, and then a commercial ionizer with some sort of holding tank, so that that water would be immediately available. I mean, you can get tanks from 5 gallons up to 5,000 gallons, so depending on what the need is. And we did this with a dairy farm. We did an experiment where we took cows out, because cows, as you know, and dairy milk is loaded with all kinds of chemicals and antibiotics and what have you. So we did this experiment. We wanted to see if we could improve the quality of the milk, the health of the cow first, the quality of the milk and the production, and we end up increasing the production of the milk by over 30%. And of course, we produced a milk that was chemically free. And the cows were also healthier as well. They didn't get sick. They didn't need antibiotics. And so we need to consider this not only for human consumption, this alkaline structured functional water. I call it alkaline structured functional water. The reason we need to consider this kind of water for the future is because we have so much to deal with in our environment right now, and things are not getting better, things are getting worse. I mean, Fukushima is a perfect example of the water getting worse, not better, and that's just one source of contamination that we have to consider. And when we look at the half-life of of ionizing radiation, I mean, we're saying this is going to be with us for thousands of years. So
it's definitely an important issue. When you have this alkaline water and it's produced, how long is that alkaline water stable for? Is with all its variable characteristics, such as the microclustering and the ORP and the low millivolts, is it stable for hours, days, weeks?
it depends on what you put it in. If you put it in a plastic bottle, it's going to interact, the high pH water is going to interact with the plastics, and you're going to end up losing the pH and also the ORP and also the structuring, and then the Hertz is going to go up, and the oxygen level of the water is going to go up, and you're ending up drinking a water that you didn't plan on drinking. Okay? So, if you're going into stainless steel, somebody says, well, I don't like stainless steel because every time I put something in there, it freezes my hand. Well, you have to make a mitt for it or something and then go that direction. Well, stainless steel is inert. So that would be an acceptable container that you could put it in, and whatever I always say, what you make to drink, you ought to drink during that day. Will it stay in its pH for how long? I mean, we're talking about pH staying for 30 days or longer. The ORP is going to slowly increase as the clustering increases. And so we're going to lose our ORP within 24 to 72 hours.
Okay, how about the glass? That's an important point. How about using glass as a storage container? And also, what are your thoughts on improving the structure of the water by refrigerating it to like 37 to 39 degrees?
Well, I was going to mention, if you put it in the refrigerator, you're going to hold the pH and you're going to hold the ORP for a longer period of time. You're suspending everything. That's why we put things in the refrigerator. Everything slows down. So you're going to have less of an affinity for this, like attraction, a law of physics, like attracts like, where these water molecules start collecting together and we start losing some of the benefits of the structuring of the water, which is the reason why we created this water in the first place. So yes, refrigeration does help. So I do recommend refrigeration if you want to keep it longer than that particular day.
And do you like glass? Is better than...
Well, the glass has resins in it that will interact with the ions or the electrical charges. And
is that right?
Yeah. So I'm concerned about glass. I mean, glass is better than plastic. Granted, it depends.
How about ceramic?
Same problems with ceramics too, as well, because it's a porous material as well. But it depends on what's in the ceramics. So you have to realize that glass and ceramics is a porous material. It's going to interact. The water is going to interact with that glass and ceramics, and any toxins that are there that have an opposite polarity, it's going to pull into the water, and you're going to be drinking it.
All right. So your ideal container is a stainless steel container.
I don't like them. I mean, I don't like carrying around stainless steel. I don't think anybody's really created, a good stainless steel container. But that's that's how we store our water. And
that's interesting. And so if you store it in the fridge, obviously contamination is not much.
Well, it's not a real issue. But if I was going to store something, I'm going to
clean it. How often do you clean the container?
Well, I wanted to say, Dr. Mercola, that I would store it in glass before I would store it in plastic.
Oh, sure.
And if I had stainless steel, I don't know anybody that has titanium containers. Those would be awfully expensive. You would.
Carbon fiber.
Yeah. You could store it in that. But what was your other question?
Let's see. The refrigerator. I forgot what that was, but I did have another one with respect to the refrigerator. Obviously, there's an electric motor that causes the refrigerator to stay cool, and that imparts electromagnetic frequencies. And I'm wondering if you have measured or are concerned about any of those frequencies being imparted into the water.
Dr. Mercola, I drove into L.A. yesterday, and I was measuring the electrical frequency of LA, and it's over 100 megahertz.
Okay.
Excuse me, 100 Gauss. Excuse me. Got to switch my frequencies to my harmonics to the frequencies, but it's measured in Gauss. It was over 100. In fact, I couldn't measure it. My meter only goes to 100. Anything over 3...
Was that from the ambient environment of LA, or was that from your car? Because the motor will produce EMFs too.
Yeah, it was a combination of both. I mean, I also went over to the atomic plant too as well, there over by Camp Pendleton. And I was measuring the electrical magnetic frequencies there too as well, which were in excess of 50 Gauss. I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot higher. So they've contained those energies quite well.
Well, and just for those listeners who aren't familiar with those measurements, we'd like to be ideally under 1.
Yeah, 0 would be perfect.
Is that
Well, the Environmental Protection...
Where's milligauss?
Yeah, milligauss. The Environmental Protection Agency suggested that anything over 3 milligauss would be harmful.
And you were measuring 50 Gauss?
We're measuring 50 milligauss.
50 milligauss, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that's, yeah, so it was 50 to 100 times higher. And ideally, you know, if you're going to, what I caution people, although not so much on our site, but it's certainly I've done personally, is when you're purchasing a home, which not many people are doing nowadays, but when they're doing that or selecting one to live in and rent, ideally they would take a Gauss meter and measure that to make sure there aren't these high ambient fields, because if you're living there, you're going to be exposed to it. So that could frequently, that was the determination of how I chose my last home, is I measured every home that was a possible factor, and I measured to see which ones with the lowest Gauss ratings.
Well, to answer your question on the refrigerator, the motor does put out a milligauss. It's anywhere from 50 to 70 milligauss. But the most dangerous instrument in the in the hospital, or the most dangerous instrument in a home, is the hairdryer.
Really? Higher than a refrigerator?
Yes, higher than a refrigerator. You could blow your brains out with a hairdryer.
Wow, that's good to know.
Yeah, a hairdryer will range anywhere. It gets up into the thousands of milligauss.
So there really should be a warning. You should not even touch that unless you are grounded.
You should be at least 5 feet away from your hairdryer.
Yeah,
So
ideally.
women ask me this all the time. Well, you know, what do I do? I says, you attach the hairdryer in another room. You know how doctors, when they're doing radiology, they say, oh, excuse me, I'm going to step behind this lead shield here. You know, I don't want to pick up any of the ionizing radiation here, but excuse me, I just want to put my hairdryer behind this lead shield, and I got this tube coming out from this other room where I'm drying my hair. But
yes, but obviously people would not use. I'm not advocating the use of hair dryers, but to mitigate some of the damage, one could use a grounding strap, which would allow. You know, we're actually doing some work with that, and going to be doing some objective instrumentation to video documentation of how that makes a difference. But we'll actually use a hairdryer as a demonstration. I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah, use a hairdryer. It's a good illustration. Everybody has one in their home, and I think that may be classified as the most dangerous instrument or appliance in the home.
And I think that's probably a good one to stop on. Otherwise, we'll continue talking here till the sun goes down.
Okay.
Because you're just such a wealth of information. But we'll definitely get back to you in the future. And I wanted to really thank you for your graciousness in helping us understand these really important issues.
Well, thank you for first allowing this interview to happen, and secondly, for being open to maybe some new information. And I know a lot of people out there, it's going to be very new to them. So I appreciate that. You know, if you get to a bookstore and you do find the pH Miracle, we do have the same cover on 2 books. You got to look at the pub date, because the pub date 2002 versus 2010. We just released the pH Miracle revised and updated June of 2010, and both of them have a wealth of information. You could read the first book, and then you get the second pH Miracle book, and you go, wow, they're totally different. But they complement each other, and I'd highly recommend anybody that wants to learn more about the work that I've been engaged in for the last 30 years, that they check this book out or download it. Kindle has it, or go to their local bookstore, and that's probably the least expensive offering that I could give you of my 30 years of research.
People tend to not fully appreciate the value of books. I mean, 30 years is a long time, and you've really compiled, tens of thousands of hours. Actually, the definition of a world-class expert is someone who spent more than 10,000 hours on the topic. Typically, that puts you to the world-class level, and you've been there for a long time. So,
oh well, thank you.
Really good value if you want to pick up the book, and I would recommend. I thought it was an excellent read, and it highlights and sinks in many of the things that we teach too. So,
right.
So, pH Miracle.